Finally tonight, a farmer who just would not give up, digging in his field in Michigan when he thought he hit a fence post.
It began like any other Friday morning in the quiet heartlands of Lima Township, Michigan. James Bristol was out in the field, same as always. No camera crews, no scientists, just the cool dawn air, a shovel, and a soybean field that had been in his family for generations. He was expecting a post. What he unearthed was a mystery buried for nearly 15,000 years. This is the incredible true story of how a humble farmer and two buddies stumbled onto one of the most important prehistoric discoveries in the state of Michigan. And it all started with a thunk in the dirt. The plan was simple: clear some land, install a drainage system. James had been meaning to get it done for weeks. That morning in 2015, two of his longtime friends offered to lend a hand. So by 7:30 a.m., coffee in their systems and work gloves on, the trio headed out across the damp soil. They joked, they stretched, they complained about their backs. A classic Friday on the farm. 20 minutes in, James struck something hard. At first, he thought it was a rock. Then, maybe an old fence post lodged deep in the ground. He shoved the shovel in again, clank. Whatever it wasn't wood. "Hey," he shouted, "there's something here." The others gathered around. Kneeling in the muck, they began digging with their hands, wiping away the sticky clay. Then came a curve, a strange smooth arc of something white. It was too big to be a tree root, too dense to be junk. And then came the first real chill down James's spine. It was bone. At first, they thought it might be part of an old cow, maybe a long-dead farm animal lost to time. But as they brushed away the dirt, they realized this wasn't just a bone. It was massive. The men stood there in silence for a moment, staring. It looked like a rib, nearly as long as a grown man's arm and thick as a baseball bat. One of James's friends broke the tension. He picked it up, ran across the field, and shouted, "We found a dinosaur!" They laughed, but something in James's gut said this was no joke. He had lived on this land his whole life. But this felt ancient, untouched, sacred. Moments later, a small figure came bounding down from the house, James's 5-year-old grandson. The boy froze at the sight of the bone. His jaw dropped. He didn't speak, just stared. Even a child could feel the weight of history in that moment. By noon, the laughter had faded. Curiosity turned into a sense of responsibility. James knew this was bigger than him. So he picked up the phone and called the University of Michigan's Museum of Paleontology. They didn't hesitate. The next day, a team of scientists and paleontologists pulled up in a caravan of trucks. Among them was Dr. Daniel Fisher, one of the country's leading experts on ancient mammals. When he stepped out into the field, he didn't say a word. He just looked at the bone and stared. James watched the team whisper among themselves. Point, nod, scribble in notebooks. "I figured they were just trying to make sense of how this thing ended up on my farm," James recalled later. But the silence was unnerving. Finally, Dr. Fisher turned to him. "We believe you found the remains of a mammoth," he said, "and there might be more." The window was tight. They had just one day to excavate as much as possible before weather conditions made the site unworkable. So 15 staff members rolled up their sleeves, grabbed their tools, and dove in. Local excavator James Ballinger was called in to assist, his backhoe ready to peel back layers of earth that hadn't been touched since the Ice Age. The energy shifted. What started as a casual dig was now an all-hands-on-deck archaeological sprint. And then, someone shouted, "Another bone, bigger, heavier." Then another, and another. And then, halfway through the field, a massive tusk broke through the soil like a ghost emerging from the past. The scientists froze. Their eyes widened. This wasn't just a mammoth. It was a nearly complete skeleton. As the mud flew and the clock ticked down, the field transformed into something out of a time travel movie. Piece by piece, the mammoth emerged, both shoulder blades, dozens of rib bones, a full pelvis, part of the spine, a skull the size of a small boulder. and two massive curling tusks intact. It was one of the most well-preserved Ice Age fossils ever found in the state. The only parts missing? The hind legs and feet. But what they did recover was enough to send shockwaves through the scientific community. Even Dr. Fisher looked stunned. "This is easily one of the top 10 mammoth finds in Michigan history," he said. But the story was far from over. The bones were real. That much was clear. But the bigger question loomed like a shadow. How did this mammoth die? And why was it buried in a Michigan soybean field? Dr. Fisher had a theory. He pointed to markings on the ribs, sharp incisions, too deliberate to be natural, tool marks. To him, it suggested something incredible. Humans had hunted this mammoth, and not just killed it, they may have butchered it, and then buried it in a shallow pond to preserve the meat, like a prehistoric refrigerator. Back then, 15,000 years ago, what is now Michigan was a frigid tundra, scattered with lakes and glaciers. Hunter-gatherers roamed the landscape in small, desperate groups. Food meant survival. This mammoth may have fed an entire community, but why they abandoned the remains, why it stayed hidden for so long, that's still a mystery. Despite its hairy legacy, this mammoth may not have been fully woolly. Dr. Fisher examined the skull and tusks and realized something rare. This looked like a Jeffersonian mammoth, a hybrid species with traits of both woolly and Columbian mammoths. Not many have ever been found. In other words, James hadn't just stumbled onto any old mammoth. He'd found a genetic puzzle piece that could unlock new insights into mammoth evolution and migration. And the condition of the bones, how intact they were, made this discovery all the more valuable for research. Word spread like wildfire. By the next morning, cars were pulling up to the Bristle farm. Locals, teachers, kids on field trips, curious retirees, paleontology hobbyists. Even a man in hospice care asked to be driven out just to see the bones before he died. "It's been overwhelming," James said, but in a good way. Some visitors wept. Others brought flowers. One kid drew a picture of a smiling mammoth and handed it to James like a thank you card. The discovery had become more than just bones in the dirt. It had become a symbol of history, of curiosity, of community. He could keep the bones, mount them in his home, sell them to a private collector, or he could give them up. Dr. Fisher made the ask gently. Would James be willing to donate the remains to the University of Michigan? James didn't answer right away. But later that week, after watching his grandson trace the outline of the mammoth's rib in the soil, he made his decision. He gave it all away. Today, the bristle mammoth, named after the man who unearthed it, rests at the University of Michigan, preserved for study, education, and public display. It continues to teach scientists about Ice Age migration, human behavior, and environmental change. But the most powerful part of the story? It didn't come from a lab. It came from a man with a shovel. A man who said yes to digging a little deeper. Think about that. A normal day. A simple field. And under it, a window to the past. What would you have done? Would you keep the bones? Would you hand them over to science? Would you dig or walk away? Let us know in the comments. And if this story made you pause even for a second, hit that like button. Share it with someone curious, and don't forget to subscribe. Because the past isn't just something we read about. Sometimes it's buried in our own backyard.